Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. I'm going to give you a scenario. Let's suppose you were a fan of a team that had a shot at the playoffs. While anything can happen in the playoffs, your odds of doing anything are highly unlikely. You're not a team that's tasted a lot of playoff success, but you've been playing some pretty mediocre football, and you'd be going into the postseason as one of the heavy underdogs. Making the postseason is great, but if you make the postseason, you lose your first round pick. Which would you rather have? Well, this is a question that a lot of NBA fans face when it comes to lottery protected picks, and whether or not it'd be better to miss the postseason and keep the pick than make it only to lose in 5 in the first round. You don't see this a whole lot in the NFL. But in 1996, the Atlanta Falcons gave up their first round pick because of a lottery protection. This is the story behind the time that the Falcons made the postseason, but lost their first rounder in the process. First, we need some context behind the trade and the season. For this, we have to go all the way back to 1990, when the Atlanta Falcons had the first pick in the draft. Since the Cowboys had the worst record, but they took Steve Walsh in the first round of the supplemental draft, thereby forfeiting their right to a first-round pick in 1990, the pick went to the next worst team, which was the Atlanta Falcons, who went 3-13 the year before. However, the Colts came calling, and the Falcons decided to trade the pick to Indianapolis, provided that the Colts could sign George to a contract, which they did. In return, the Colts gave up a boatload, giving up 6-time Pro Bowl tackle Chris Hinton, first-round pick Andre Rison, and a few other picks as well, including a future first-rounder. This meant that Jeff George was now an Indianapolis Colt. Safe to say, this move did not work out as intended for Indy. George was disgruntled, he complained many times, and he held out in 1993 while asking for a trade or hoping that his contract would be renegotiated. He led the league with 56 sacks in 1991, had an abysmal 1992 season where he threw 7 touchdowns and 15 picks, and did not do a whole lot in his 4 years with the Colts. In fact, general manager Jim Irsay was so fed up with George that in 1993, he delivered a scathing press conference, saying that he was insulted by George, and that the Colts weren't going to move again just so that he wouldn't have to play in Indianapolis anymore. The whole situation there was a chaotic mess that was getting uglier and uglier as the years went on. But in 1994, George finally got his request. The Colts were ready to move on from him, and the Atlanta Falcons, the same team that passed on taking him 4 years prior, were interested again. It had come full circle. After the 93 season, the Falcons fired Jerry Glanville and hired June Jones to be their next head coach. And Jones loved George. Jones said that George had one of the best workouts he'd ever seen, and that George is the kind of guy that can get a team to the postseason. And George was excited, saying that he felt as though he needed to leave home to be his best, and that he was excited to have a second chance to start a new life. Got their guy again. What did Atlanta give up in the trade? In return, the Falcons gave up their first and third round picks in 1994, along with another pick on top of that. This pick was conditional. We've seen conditional picks based on snap count and making the roster and stuff like that, but there haven't been too many with the condition tied here. As things stood, the pick would be a second round pick in 1996. But if Jeff George played 95% of the snaps, and the Falcons won 9 games in 1995, then the pick would become a first rounder. And keep in mind that in 1995, the Colts traded away a first round pick to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for Craig Erickson, which didn't work out. But the point is that whether or not the Colts had a first rounder in 95 entirely was tied to how well the Falcons did. Entering the 1995 season, the Falcons were not expected to do a whole lot, as Vegas had their over-under for wins at 7.5. Additionally, this was a fan base that was starving for playoff football. Since 1983, the team had made it to the postseason just once, and they finished with a losing record in 11 of the 12 years during that stretch. However, through 15 games, the Falcons were sitting at 8-7. It came down to a very weird game against the San Francisco 49ers. As things stood, the Falcons owned the tiebreaker for the 6th and final wildcard spot over the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings, with the Lions winning their game on Saturday to finish at 10-6, meant that there were no crazy 4-way tie scenarios that Atlanta had to worry about. For the Falcons, the path to the postseason was simple. If you win, you're in. However, along the same lines, if you win, you lose your first round pick. A lot on the line no matter what happens. Entering this game, it looked like the Falcons had no shot to win. They played the 49ers earlier in the year and they lost 41-10 against Atlanta. The 49ers were arguably the hottest team in football, as they had won 6 straight games. The 49ers were playing for home field, as they were tied with the Dallas Cowboys at 11-4 atop the conference. Since the Niners beat the Cowboys 38-20 in Week 11, a win by San Francisco guaranteed that the postseason would run through Candlestick Park in stretch. In fact, San Francisco entered this game against Atlanta as a double-digit favorite. Nobody was giving Atlanta much of a chance. That takes us to this game. Christmas Eve 1995. Win and you're in. Lose and you keep your pick. The Niners jumped out to a 14-3 lead, and they led 21-10 midway through the second quarter. Jeff George even got injured, meaning that Bobby Hebert was now entering the game. Kind of ironic that the final piece in the Jeff George trade was dependent on the man that George replaced. But somehow the Falcons found a way to come back. After Morten Andersen hit a 59-yard field goal, which was one of the longest in NFL history at the time, Atlanta trailed just 21-16 at the half. Late in the fourth, San Francisco had a 27-22 lead, and the Falcons had to go nearly the length of the field. Facing 4th and 5, Atlanta converted on a pass to Eric Metcalf to keep their season alive. And on the very next play, Hebert found Terrence Mathis for a 37-yard touchdown. Atlanta led 28-27. By the skin of their teeth, they were winning and they were on the verge of clinching a playoff spot. San Francisco tried driving down the field, but it did not work. A sack to get them out of any possible field goal range, followed by an ever so slight overthrow to Jerry Rice that would have gotten them in a position for a chip shot field goal for Jeff Wilkins, followed by an interception on 4th down into the hands of Kevin Ross, meant that the game was over. Atlanta had pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the season and had clinched a playoff berth in dramatic fashion. That was the good news. The bad news? They finished 9-7. By crossing that 9-win threshold, the Falcons had to give up their first-round pick in 1996 to the Indianapolis Colts. And for those wondering, the Bears won their Week 17 game, so there was no scenario where the Falcons could have lost this game and have been in the postseason. It was a true either-or deal. As for who the Colts took with that first-round pick that Atlanta gave them, they took some no-name wide receiver that didn't do a whole lot in the league. His name was Marvin Harrison. Harrison only wound up playing 13 seasons in Indy, he led the league in receiving yards twice, he made it to 8 Pro Bowls, he helped the Colts win their first Super Bowl since moving to Indianapolis, and he got inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016. Now, I think it's safe to say that Indy won the deal. Again, it's not too often that you see trade conditions like this one, at least not this extreme. One that comes to mind was the unique Ngakoue trade between the Jaguars and the Vikings, where the Jaguars got a conditional 5th rounder that could have been upgraded to a 3rd if Ngakoue won the Super Bowl. But trades like this are few and far between. So if you're a Colts fan and want to know who to thank for Marvin Harrison, you can thank the 49ers for losing their final game of the 1995 season. And if you're a Falcons fan and want to thank someone for making the postseason, or curse someone for taking away your draft pick, you have the heroics of Bobby Hebert off the bench for that. This is about as close to a lottery-protected pick as you're going to see in NFL history. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaredGator9 and subscribe to 60 Second NFL History on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.